welcome once again to the India Today Mood of the Nation survey brought to you by Karvi. All the data, of course, in India Today magazine. Remember, this is a survey that's continued for 2 decades, a biannual survey every January and August, where we give you a sense of what the country thinks on the hot button issues of the day.
And over the last 20 years, India Today's Mood of the Nation has built a formidable reputation as India's foremost barometer to get a sense of which way the winds are blowing and what would happen if elections are held today. And over the next 1 hour, that's the question we hope to answer.
That's right. We'll have several special guests joining us on the show. We've got Raj Chengappa, the editorial director of India Today magazine. He's with us. We're also joined by Rahul Verma, political analyst with the Center for Policy Research. We're joined by Dr. Sandeep Shastri, leading political analyst, and joined by Gaurav Ballabh of the Congress and Nalin Kohli of the BJP. So we'll get various views, and Dr. Sanjay Kumar also is joining us from the CSDS. Okay, let's then go and find out all the big questions, the answers to the big questions, including who would be winning an election if it was held today, a general election. We are in 2021, but that's what the biannual survey does, gives you a sense of where we stand today. Let's start, Rahul, by looking at vote share if polls were held today. And these are the numbers that stand out. 43% to the NDA. The ruling NDA gets 43%. The UPA gets 27%. Others get 30%. And if you look at that in comparison to what our poll said in August, the MOTN, the Mood of the Nation, had the NDA at 42%. So there's a 1% climb up for the NDA. The UPA is where it is, 27%. Others, 31%, are now down to 30%. So if you look at the worm as it is looking at, the NDA is more or less rock solid. Lok Sabha 2019, 45%, now 43%, just a marginal dip. And the UPA is exactly where it was almost 2 years ago during the Lok Sabha elections.
Quite incredible, Rajdeep, because you can't have a year where a country faces more adversity and shocks than this. You've had the pandemic, you've had the economic recession, you've had Chinese aggression, and despite all of that, over the last 5 months, they've been able to increase their overall vote share by 1%. Raj Chengappa, quick initial word from you. You'd imagine that in the midst of so much adversity, any government, no matter who's running it, its popularity is likely to take a hit. Your poll by Karvi for India Today suggests that that's not the case. They're holding firm.
And I think that's quite remarkable, Rahul. Look at what happened to President Trump, now ex-President Trump. He did badly with the pandemic. He was voted out of power. I mean, we haven't seen a sitting US president voted out of power for the last 30 years, I think. Whereas when it comes to Prime Minister Modi and the BJP, they not only consolidate in the raging pandemic. If you recall, in January 2019, their ratings were down. They, in fact, had dropped below the majority, the BJP itself. And they pick up in the midst of the raging pandemic in August 2020. And now in January 2021, you have them in, a slight dip, but holding, which is, as you said, these three major crises the country faces. What does it indicate? It indicates that they have faith in the government to deliver on these issues. They believe Mr. Modi is the best bet at the moment. And therefore, you're seeing the numbers that's there. And just as a counter, I think the opposition, if it is just held, is really a bad show for them. Because here they had great opportunity.
They couldn't have had a bigger opportunity.
Yeah. And they have, I think, squandered it.
Let's come to what would these votes translate into when it comes into seats. So if elections were held today, and I'll first deal with the NDA-UPA alliance, and then we'll come to a party-wise breakup. But Karvi Insights tells India Today that if elections were held today, and this is the first time you're seeing it on your screen right now, the NDA alliance would get 321 seats. That's 21 seats down from the Lok Sabha elections of 2019, when they picked up 353 seats. But even then, it's a remarkable performance given the fact that you can't, from a governance perspective, have a tougher year than this. The UPA is likely to bag 93 seats. That's exactly the number of seats they got in 2019. And others taken together might end up at 129. If I were to look at a trend line, starting from the Lok Sabha elections of May 2019 to now, The NDA from 353 went to 357 in our first MOTN, after that to 303, then 316, and now settling at 321. It's always been above 300. January 2020 was the low point, but 320, Rajdeep, in the middle of all the adversity that we're dealing with, is remarkable.
And also remember that the 353 was when the Shiv Sena was part of the NDA and indeed the Akali. So what you could say somewhere is that the NDA is holding its own and the opposition is simply not lifting, it's not taking off. You know, it's stuck where it is, and there is no evidence here of anti-incumbency. That's very clear, that the gap between the government and the opposition remains as wide as ever. That's the first really big takeaway that you can give from these numbers. And this is almost now 2 years. So almost halfway, some would say, just approaching the 2-year mark of Mr. Modi 2.0. That's interesting. And if you look at these numbers, it remains steady. I think that's the, you know, that's what gives you the analysis that this government has been able to retain its vote share.
You know, this is great
and that's
news
very, very important.
From the government's perspective, but Gaurav Vallabh, from the opposition's perspective, if this were a cricketing analogy, this is where the pitch, the weather condition, the team, everything is in your favor. If despite that you can't go out and score runs against the opposition bowlers, then when will you?
Rahul, I'm not making any question on the survey because every survey have its own biases and every survey have its strengths and weaknesses. But I had a very typical question and which I want the answer. Post 2019 means after 2019 Lok Sabha election, there were elections in 5 states. That is Haryana, Jharkhand, Bihar, Maharashtra and Delhi. I am asking you a simple question. In any of these 5 states, in all these 5 states except one, the Congress, I am talking only about Congress, the performance got improved. And in all 5 states, the BJP's performance deteriorated if you talk about number of seats or about the percentage. Talking about the pandemic, Rahul, I am statistically asking a question. Name any country in Southeast Asia whose fatality rate due to COVID is higher than ours. Name any country in Southeast Asia or in the entire world whose Q1 GDP declined by -23.9%. Name any country in the world whose per capita income reduced by -5.5%. Name any country in the world who had still not recovered because of Corona. And last but not least, can you give me any parameter of governance, whether social, whether economic, whether political, any parameter of governance where the ranking of the country got improved? I'm asking a very simple question. Get me the answer. I'm not denying that.
You've made a very important observation, especially when it comes to state versus center. And we'll also come to our political analysts in a moment. But respond to that, Nalin Kohli, because while you can take satisfaction in these numbers, the truth is that in polls held since 2019 in states, on an average, the BJP's vote has declined. NDA's vote
But Rajdeep, that's an academic point. Once again, who formed the government in Bihar? Who formed the government in Haryana? Okay, so the winning batsman didn't score as many runs as he scored the last time, but you still lost the match.
Rahul, there is a decline of about, on an average, 1 minute, sir. There is a decline on an average of about 13.5% in the NDA's vote share between centre and state.
It's of academic interest, Rajdeep.
No, the point he's trying to make, and I think which Nalin needs to respond to, our poll shows the popularity for NDA at the centre remains as high as it was in 2019. It is in state election, and we are entering an important state election here, is where there is a distinction between centre and state. Is that something that the BJP factors in, that the popularity of Mr. Modi and the BJP at the centre is much higher than your popularity at the state level? That's I think what Gaurav Vallabh was trying to raise, and he also gave indicators which he suggests would reveal the fact that the government's performance is not as high as our mood of the nation suggests.
I have several things to say, so I'd just like to finish them one by one. I'll come to this part last. The first is with regards to the mood of the nation. I think your statistics make it very clear that the NDA, and particularly which is led by the BJP, and we bank a lot on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's popularity and the work of his government, reached a high point in 19, better than 14, then showed a dip downwards, which the lowest point is 2020, January. And then, in the pandemic, notwithstanding anything and everything that the opposition wishes to say, has seen an upward climb. That too, a depleted NDA, which means that the BJP as a political party is on the right track in terms of what people, and elections are won when people who are voters are convinced and put their fingers on the button. It doesn't happen by any discussion or any argument elsewhere. That's the first point. So there is something good happening in the government's performance and in the leadership of Prime Minister Modi. That's a clear message. Now, people can find fault with that. People can find nuances to it. That's the blunt point. That the BJP has handled the pandemic well, and people are convinced that this government was on the right track, given its agenda and the crisis. Second, with regards to the state election, I think Rahul has made an important point, and I thank him because that would have been my logical answer. Winning the match or being happy about brownie points that I scored better but lost the match is an attitude that we have no complaints about the Congress party. In fact, as far as we are concerned, we would like them to continue on this path. Keep patting their back that we have a good solid thing, because they probably need to understand that elections are won when you reach out to the people, and the people, the voters, are convinced about you. The difference between a mainstream political approach and what, if you will permit me to call, a fringe political approach, is that the mainstream political approach is focused on issues and is focused on solutions and is focused on agenda of performance.
Okay,
let me finish. One minute, Mr. Sardesai. There's been a lot of attacks made.
Sir, out of the 5 states, you have lost 3. I just want to put it out of the 5 states, you have lost 3 since 2019.
Yes, of course we've lost it. These are facts. I mean, how can you dispute a fact? I'm not here to dispute facts.
Okay.
I mean, how can a fact be disputed? I mean, but let me finish my point. I said between a fringe political approach and a mainstream political approach is that the mainstream political approach focuses on issues, on performance, and a positive agenda for change. A fringe approach plays to the gallery. They have nothing to do with the ground. Now, as far as I make a comparison, yes, the Congress party is entitled, as every Indian citizen, to have a point of view and put out as many questions they want. You know, the problem is the Congress party never has answers. You can point out several questions asked. Congress can do answering. We are respond to the people of India. And I think we repose our faith in what they decide.
You know, Gaurav Ballab respond. The fact is that the pitch was ideal in a way for the opposition. You've had the Chinese aggression. You've had a pandemic, you've had an economy in recession. Now, if in such times also, the opposition is unable to lift itself, there's clearly something seriously wrong. You can go on targeting the Modi government for what you believe are its failures. But the public, as per the mood of the nation, is not willing to accept the opposition as a viable alternative. That's the problem.
Okay. Rajdeep ji, the point raised by Rahul ji and Nalin ji, that this is of academic interest. Rahul ji, is it an academic interest when you lost the power in Jharkhand? Who was having the government before 2020 January in Jharkhand? Who was having government in Maharashtra? So, out of 5
somebody who's once again, Rajdeep, let me respond to Rajdeep.
The mood of the nation is giving the BJP 320 and you're at 97.
One second. If this is some other Congress spokesperson, I would still understand the lack of facility with data. But for a professor at XLRI who taught finance, the inability to comprehend what this data is about is baffling. We are dealing with the mood of the nation. What would happen if elections are held now? You are telling us what happened in past elections. There's nothing to do with our data.
No, Rahul ji. I am just trying to say mood of the nation because we are discussing and comparing last 1.5 years data, Rahul ji. So you were saying it is of academic interest, sir. It is not of academic interest. BJP had lost the government in Jharkhand. They had lost the government in Maharashtra. In Haryana and Bihar, they had marginally managed the government. Anyhow, now coming to the point which Rajdeep ji had raised, Rajdeep had raised a point that what about governance, and I had raised
No,
a
no, my
simple
point is
question.
you're not lifting. My point is the opposition, our survey is showing that the gap between the government and the opposition remains identical to what it was in 2019 May. That's the point.
Rajdeep, I don't want to question on survey because I don't know how many data points, what is
12,000.
the
Our
structure.
size, so we have interviewed more than 12,000 people across 97
Rajdeep,
parliamentary constituencies.
So Rajdeep, do you think that a country of 135 plus crore is a representative sample size? I don't want to enter because that is a more a research methodology question which I don't want to enter. Although I can raise 100 questions on that. I had a very simple point. What is the mood of the farmers? Can't we see the mood of the farmers? First of all, it was told it is only Punjab, Haryana farmers. See what happened yesterday in Karnataka. Then it was told what is the mood of the young people. 9.2% is the unemployment rate. So I'm always saying we lost because of pandemic. I am asking why the other countries of the world are not having that impact on our economy as we are having after the COVID.
Okay.
The problem, the answer is that before COVID itself, we were in recession. I had asked a simple question again repeating. Can Ms. Nalinji let me know any one governance parameter? I am repeating any one governance parameter on which government ranking got improved internationally or with respect to the last year. Any choice. Choice is yours. Give me any one parameter. Education, health, social security, economy, GDP, per capita income, atrocities, crime against women. Tell me any one parameter.
Okay.
That
So
is what I want to do.
I want to move the needle also. Nalin will respond to this, but I also want to take our viewers through all the data that we've taken so much effort to bring. One second. Others will get.
In 2 sentences.
Okay, go on.
I won't
Respond
take
in
more
2
than that.
Okay, 2 sentences. Nalin.
You know, you use the word baffling. I'm going to use the word hilarious. I mean, here is Mr. Govt, or professor as he is, pointing out the so-called failures, and then your mood of the nation shows that they are exactly where they are.
So are we to draw the corollary that they are completely politically incompetent? I mean, I don't know what to say.
Okay, let's get the 3 political scientists to give us a sense of their first takeaway on this. Why don't you go one by one? Rahul Verma, you start first. Give us a sense, explain to our viewers, is this clear evidence of there is no opposition, there is no alternative to Mr. Modi, or is this a positive vindication, affirmation of the leadership of the NDA?
Thank you, Rajdeep, and thank you, everyone. So let me start making a comment on, I think the 12,000 sample size, if it has been done following all procedures, is a good enough sample. Professor Vallabh can keep raising questions, but this is a good enough number to make any sort of national level projections. Second point, I think what Rahul very well put, which is in the cricketing analogy, right? Like everything, and Govindji is correct about this, that there is sort of like, you know, external aggression and health crisis and economic crisis. Despite everything, what it seems like that nationally the citizens of India do not think opposition, the current opposition, as the alternative. And it can also be seen in terms of like what farmers protest and other things we are talking about. These are all non-party protests in that sense. In some ways, the opposition seems to be missing on the street, mobilizing people's grievances if there are. So this is a big question mark on the opposition. They cannot run away from it. The third point, which I want to sort of share, it is correct that what we are witnessing, a divergence between how people are voting in state elections and how people are voting in central election. And perhaps you can take back to the cricketing analogy, right? Some batsmen do well in tests and some batsmen do well in one day or T20.
After a big India victory, everybody's Harsha Bhogle.
Okay, let's get the next 2. Dr. Shastri, your first reactions. A quick short comment.
My quick reaction to this is both Shri Ballabh and Shri Nalin Kohli are right. The only thing is they are looking at it from different perspectives. I think our mood of the nation clearly shows that the citizens seem to have faith in the way the government has handled the situation. This does not mean that the government has necessarily handled the situation very well. It shows an element of resilience in the Indian citizen, that he or she thinks that the way the government has handled the crisis has been the best it can be done. It is also a reflection of the hopeless inability of the forces ranged against the government to be able to get their act together. Rahul made an important point that the agitation against the government does not see the opposition parties there, but sees more of citizen groups who are involved in it. So I think in some senses, the point that the Congress spokesperson made about challenges the country is facing is right, but that does not necessarily imply that the citizen does not rest his or her faith in the government, and that faith in the government is a byproduct of the political environment you have, where the citizen sees no other option at the present point of time. And finally, very clearly, I think we need to distinguish between state verdicts and central verdict. The mood of the nation is a reflection of citizen perspective on the central government and its leadership there.
And we have a separate poll for the state elections. We'll call Professor Vallabh for that. He understands data well. We'll have a poll out very soon for all the states where elections are being held.
Professor
Sanjay Kumar.
I would agree to all what Rahul Verma has said and what Professor Sandeep Shastri has said. I would only take the discussion a little forward. What is happening during last couple of years, or maybe a little more than that, that people's opinion on some of the issues, they may be critical about the government's performance. They have not been very critical about government performance on the pandemic. But even if they are not happy with the government performance, that is not immediately translating into the party or the leader which they want to vote for. I would give you an example that even before 2019 Lok Sabha elections, through the surveys which were coming out, which we had done, we got a clear sense that people were not very happy with the economic performance of the government on the economic front. There was rural distress and people were raising questions about that. But when it came to voting, the same set of voters, when we asked the questions about voting, they still said they are going to vote for BJP and in the name of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So what is happening, the causal relationship which we are trying to look at, that if people are unhappy with the performance of the government on any account, they are likely to not to vote for BJP. That's not happening. And that's not happening. That's the failure of the opposition.
Okay.
Because they see that there is no leadership. Because the opposition is not giving any confidence among the voters of this country.
In a way, the 2019 elections, Rahul, were also seen about leadership. Leadership was foregrounded, especially after Pulwama and Balakot. And look at leadership now. Give us, if you look at Prime Minister Modi's performance, which is an important barometer in any such poll, people have been asked the question, how do you rate Prime Minister Modi's performance? And I think that comes to the point that many of our analysts are making, and Raj made. Outstanding 30%, good 44%. So add the two, 74% are saying outstanding and good, average 17, poor 6. The sense I get from this is that despite all these challenges, the PM's leadership is still being trusted. So Moditva, if I may use the word, still seems alive and well and kicking. And I think that perhaps explains the difference, Rahul, between when you look at central elections and state elections. This is the mood of the nation. And the nation is showing that the Prime Minister's performance is rated very highly, Raj, which is why you've got Prime Minister Modi, I think, on the cover of the magazine.
Absolutely. And I think we shouldn't discount his leadership by saying that the opposition didn't provide enough, ammunition to knock him down. The fact is that right through this entire crisis, both whether the health crisis, the economic crisis, and now the Chinese crisis, as well as the farmers' crisis, he showed, this is an uncertain world. The pandemic brought that. He assured the people, and if you talk to management experts, they talk of this principle of bringing certainty to uncertainty. He has this ability of, saying, I have answers to the problem.
Is it about astute communication? Because according to the Congress, the governance record is questionable, but it's much more about your communication skills.
Both. Take a look at the lockdown. world leaders would have hesitated to do the kind of drastic lockdown that Mr. Modi does. He works on information that says that unless we are able to build a health capability, the pandemic will get out of hand and it would overwhelm us. So he takes this bold decision. Many criticize for what it is, but he's leading from the front. Then comes communication. What does he do? Again, if you talk to management experts, communication is a skill where you touch at the core emotion of a person. And therefore, when many people mocked at the thali banging stuff. But what it did was, if I banged the thali also, it touched a core. You're addressing fear.
But this is very unfair, Rajdeep, to say that it's only communication.
No, I'm asking, what explains the Prime Minister's consistent high rating? Is it the strongman muscular leadership that he provides? Is it his communication skills?
Both. You see, leadership is a combination. It is never one single aspect. And leadership is, in times, especially in these times, where there are no known solutions, nobody knows how to handle the pandemic. He goes ahead and makes a decision, right? Then the other aspect of leadership is flexibility. When he finds there's economic distress, he says, all right, the Jan versus Jahan, this thing, let us bring back economy. So he's fine-tuning, and people are watching that. They know that there are no answers. Trump doesn't have an answer. Europe doesn't have an answer. You have to feel your way through. And then he communicates. Take a look at the way he says, after this, do gas duri. He's talking to the people. He says, wear your mask.
Can I make the point, and I want Sandeep Shastri to respond to it, that does it go much further than just emotion or communication? People are actually feeling the governance. This pandemic has impacted their life, and despite their salaries coming down, 19% said they lost their jobs, 66% said their salaries had taken a hit. If they like the work of the Prime Minister, 74% saying it's at least been good, if not outstanding, that shows they're relating to the work. You can't say it's messaging, because if it's messaging, then ऐसा लग रहा है कि बुद्धू बना रहे लोगों का, बुद्धू नहीं बन रहा है.
And if I before you come in, Dr. Shastri, just look at what we are saying. Just a minute, from August 2018 at 55%, it's up to 74%. So actually, the Prime Minister's rating today is a little higher than it was even in August 2019. This was just 3 months after his big victory in the Lok Sabha. So somewhere, is it Dr. Shastri, that a crisis in a way gets people to, in a way, reach out to those who show risk-taking ability, to show the tough leadership and take tough calls?
Rajdeep, I think these studies which we at Lokniti have done have clearly shown the point that the people in India believe that a sincere effort has been made during the pandemic by the government to be able to deal with the situation. People may not have been totally happy with what happened, but then they believed that a sincere effort has been done. And I think Raj Chengappa is right when he says that the way the Prime Minister communicated, the strategy that he used for communicating, bringing one issue after another, is something that did win public confidence. And let me make my third point. If you look at our data, you said close to half said he did a good job. So it's not about an excellent job, it's about a good job. Which means that in the situation that
good
we
is
found
74.
ourselves in,
one
it
second.
was a
Sandeep Shastri,
good performance by the leadership.
One second. Good is 74 because I'm including good and
good
outstanding.
Is 44, excellent is 30.
Yeah, good is 40.
Yeah, so he's adding
I'm
the
separating
He's adding
good and
the
outstanding.
Okay, you're adding.
Outstanding is 34 and
Correct.
good is 44. I'm separating the two. Outstanding and good, if you separate, good I would say somewhere in the middle. Not a very, very positive or a overwhelming vote, but a reasonably good endorsement. Now, which means that people feel that it could have been better, but what has happened is okay. So I think in that sense, it is an endorsement of what the leadership has done, in spite of whatever reservations that people may have had about certain things possibly having, could have been better.
You know, I again come back to it. It also reveals at one level the lack of options. And that's where Gaurav Ballabh, you may want to respond, because the good, if it's good is middling, Good is often in comparison. Outstanding is when I feel strongly
No,
about
but that's
someone.
one way of looking at Rajdeep. One second.
I'm
Anyone
asking
who
you-
says good typically doesn't vote against the government. So good is like a vote.
Being a middling.
I'm
How can good be middling?
I'll tell you why.
Because,
Sir,
no, 1 minute. Let me just make my point.
Let me answer.
I mean, you have 4 parameters. You have a poor, average, good, and outstanding.
Yes.
Obviously, if you're taking it to be 25% each, if I just take it as a statistical exercise, then poor would be at a 25%, average would be at a 50%, and 75 would be
Sir,
good, and outstanding would be above
sir, in
75.
politics-
If you take 1 minute. If you take good to be middling, so are you saying there are 3 parameters which are below 50%?
No, one second. I want to contest. Rajdeep, I want to contest what Sandeep Shastri is saying. In political science
I
and in
contested,
sampling,
that's why.
no, one second. In political science and in surveying, a good response, and both Sanjay Kumar and Rahul Verma can come in, is generally thought of as an affirmation vote for the government. Nobody typically who says good votes against the government. So if you got 74% saying good,
Sir, but you're not going to get 74%.
No, sure.
So my point is, those people who are looking at good are also comparing it with how the opposition is dealing with it. And if the opposition
why
is
do you
seen
make
to be
that
negative,
comparison? How
because
do you say that?
sir, in a democracy, it is possible. I'm raising
No,
the
it
question.
is possible, but you can't say.
So I'm asking Gaurav, sir, let me ask Gaurav Ballabh that. Gaurav Ballabh, you are running away from the question. When it comes to leadership, it is boiling down to that. We saw it in 2019 as well. Elections increasingly are seen as presidential. When I vote for the NDA, I also vote for my leader, who I want as Prime Minister. I ask you this question. In the last 2 years, you've not settled that issue at all. And therefore, it comes back to Modi versus who?
So, Rajdeep ji, a few data scientists on your show had mentioned that 12,000 is the sample size. 12,000.
No, you answer my question now, sir.
Lok Sabha. I will let me say. 12,000 means 22 per Lok Sabha constituency. If I assume,
sir,
one Lok
please
Sabha
answer my
constituency
question.
having 15,
Sir, let's not debate the.
answer, sir.
No, you answer my question.
I will answer.
We have limited time,
Rajdeep,
sir.
Give me 10 seconds, then I will come to your point. 10 seconds. So 22 per Lok Sabha seat is an appropriate sample size. I have my own doubts. Okay. Second point, Rajdeep ji, you had mentioned the term Moditva. Rajdeep ji, when there was an election in Jharkhand or Maharashtra or Delhi or Bihar, was there any local leader campaigning or only one person campaigning? Tell me the answer. Experts are there. Rahul ji, who were campaigning in Jharkhand? You were there.
Gaurav Ballabh, this is a mood of the nation. The opposition has not thrown up a national alternative. I will ask you this again. Please answer my question directly.
So, Rajdeep, the problem is that every day we are coming with an agenda. Every time our leaders are raising the point. See, who had raised the farm bills issue? It was Rahul Gandhi. Only thing is that there was a few select people who will come out and debate on this. Other people are going to ignore what happened to the WhatsApp chat, the Arnav Gate issue. Everybody is aware of that. I don't want to divert our discussion there. That tum mujhe TRP do, main tumhe wo दूंगा.
Sir, I am asking you a
What is
question.
happening in
Okay.
our country?
So I have asked you a question. It is 2 years since your Lok Sabha defeat. Our poll is showing the NDA is holding firm, the opposition is not rising. One of the reasons clearly is the Prime Minister's popularity remains high. One other possible, I am offering a hypothesis, is that there is no option. Nobody is offering an alternative.
No, but he's not going to accept it. He'll again give you some other
Sir,
thing which has nothing to do with your question.
Rajdeep, in all states also the same hypothesis, the same questions I had faced. But the results were something else.
Okay, hold your horses. Let's now come to the Modi government's achievements. One second. One second. We have a lot of data to cover. One second. You know,
I would like to say something on
just
the
a minute, sir.
If you were a professor in, if you were a student in Professor Vallabh's class, you know, the question is something else, the answer is something else. If he was the one who was the invigilator, he'd be very infuriated with the students' tactics. But we'll park that on the side. We'll come to the big achievements and the failures of the government. Let's take the government's achievements at the top.
All had no cattle.
Okay,
This is
okay.
the problem.
Okay,
All
okay.
had no cattle.
Okay.
This is precisely the answer to your question.
Okay,
Let
let's
everyone have equal time now, sir. Let everyone have
let's
equal
come to the
time.
Modi government's big achievements.
Yes, but
The Ram Mandir verdict comes in at the top at 27%. Now, which is interesting because actually the Ram Mandir verdict came through an order of the Supreme Court,